Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Cami has the night off. We begin with a first alert update about a man put behind bars for a murder case from over 3 decades ago. Keith Kutska is the last of 6 men who were all convicted back in 1995 for the Monfils 6 murder case, but Kutska is now finally being granted parole. All 6 men said they were innocent of the 1992 murder of Tom Monfils at the James River paper mill. Monfils' body was found in a pulp vat. Each person was sentenced to life in prison, all with different parole dates. But Kutska, who was viewed as the ringleader in the murder conspiracy, remains the only one in state custody. Brittany Schmidt tells us why the commission is now granting Kutska's release as soon as August 29th.
In a letter to Action 2 News Thursday, the chair of the Wisconsin Parole Commission says Keith Kutska can be released from the Prairie du Chien Correctional Institution as soon as August 29, 2023. But the prison has up to 30 days after that to release Kutska. He's been eligible for parole since May. The commission considered 5 factors before granting Kutska's parole, which it's denied many times before. The commission says Kutska has shown, quote, exceptional conduct while in prison for more than 2 decades, with 1 minor report. Based on his conduct, the commission says Kutska's security level has been reduced to the lowest custody level. The commission does take into account the nature of the case and the impact to the community. It believes Kutska's chances to reoffend are low and that he, quote, poses minimal risk to the community. Kutska completed all programming needs and his release plan is approved.
State of Wisconsin versus Keith Kutska.
Kutska was in his early 40s when convicted of killing Tom Monfils in 1992.
Guilty of the offense of first-degree intentional homicide.
He has served more than 27 years behind bars. The commission believes the time served is, quote, sufficient as to not depreciate the severity of his offense. In the letter, the commission says it made every effort to contact victims in this case to include in the parole process, but they weren't able to find any registered victims. The judge who sentenced Kutska to life in prison with the possibility of parole tells the commission he supports the release. The commission says, quote, Mr. Kutska has had a successful rehabilitation and reintegration with the community and has earned release. Once Kutska is released, which could be as soon as August 29th, he will be assigned a probation and parole agent from the state. The other 5 men convicted of murder alongside Kutska have been released from prison. Michael Piaskowski was the first to be released after his conviction was overturned in 2001 due to lack of evidence. Dale Baston received parole in 2017 and died 9 months later. Michael Hearn received parole in 2018 after 23 years behind bars. And in 2019, Michael Johnson and Ray Moore were released from prison about 24 hours apart. All maintained their innocence. I did reach out to one of Kutska's recent appeal attorneys who declined to comment. I did hear back from Brown County Judge John Zakowski. He was the prosecuting attorney in this case back in 1995. He says if the parole board feels he should be released, that is their decision and he accepts it. Bill.
Brittany, thank you. How about